Chapter 6 Summary Camp Activities. Percy was shown a few more places after the bathroom scene went down. The metal shop, which she had to tug him away from because heavenly warmth. The arts and crafts room. The climbing wall of doom that looked incredibly safe, with lava underneath it, which she also had to tug him away from, as he had bent down to warm his hands over the molten heat. They soon returned to the canoeing lake, where Annabeth pointed out the trail to get back to the cabins, and then went on her way. He learned a lot about her during their talk, though he was sure she hadn't thought he was paying attention. He made his way back to the cabins after dipping his feet in the water again. Most people glanced up at him, but quickly returned to their activities. He noticed how similar some looked: sharp noses, upturned eyebrows, mischievous smiles. Luke looked the same even with the scar. Some had small, short horns, a few with rooster feathers. One girl with small, white wings curled around on her ankles. They were definitely Hermes kids. "Found you a sleeping bag," Luke said when he got close enough, "and stole you some toiletries from the camp store." That word didn't go unnoticed, but he accepted the items easily with a thank you. Luke sat down next to him, watching him go through his bag with a critical eye. Somehow, despite the look, he knew Luke wouldn't take anything. The others, maybe. Two boys looked at him from across the cabin with squinted, careful eyes. Definitely. "Tough first day?" Luke asked. He set a hard, warning look at the two boys, who quickly ducked away. Not really. It's a lot to take in, but I think I'll be fine." Luke pulled out a switchblade to fiddle with. "That's good. Some don't take it very well. Others, like you, are just glad to be alive and have an explanation for all the weird stuff that happened in their lives." Luke grinned. "Yeah. So your dad is Hermes, the wing-foot messenger?" The other boy's face tensed minutely, eyes darkening, though to anyone else he would have looked just as relaxed as before. "That's him. Messengers, medicine, travels, merchants, thieves, anybody who uses the roads. That's why you're here, enjoying Cabin 11's hospitality. Hermes isn't picky about who he sponsors." Ouch. Touchy subject then. "That's cool, I guess. Still think we could build another cabin." Luke snorted, his shoulders easing back down, the bitterness in his eyes lightening, so Percy considered it a win. "Maybe we'll take you with us to Olympus next time there's a meeting," he said. "You got that look on your face that makes me think you can get their approval." "You mean the look of pleasing authority through genius, or the look of, I don't care what you're going to say, I'm telling you I'm doing this, and you can be happy about it," he said dryly. And Luke grinned. "Both." The older boy snickered and ruffled his hair. Percy decided to ask his last question. "Clarice was joking about me being big 3 materials. Then Annabeth twice said I might be the one. She said I should talk to the Oracle. What was that all about?" Luke sighed. He folded up his knife. "I hate prophecies. What do you mean?" His face twisted around the scar. "Let's just say I messed this up for everyone else. The last 2 years, ever since my trip to the Garden of the Hesperides went sour, Chiron hasn't allowed any more quests. Annabeth's been dying to get out into the world. She pestered Chiron so much, he finally told her he already knew her fate. He'd had a prophecy from the Oracle. He wouldn't tell her the whole thing, but he said Annabeth wasn't destined to go on a quest yet. She had to wait until someone special came to camp." "I'm really starting to hate that word, and its synonyms," Percy muttered, before asking louder, "Somebody special?" "Don't worry about it, kid," Luke said. "Annabeth wants to think every new camper who comes through here is the omen she's been waiting for. Now come on, it's dinner time." As if to herald his word, a loud horn blew in the distance. It was a conch shell. They lined up, 20 in total, and Percy was last, and marched up the hill, soon joined by the strayers and other assorted groups of wood nymphs and naiads. The pavilion torches blazed around the marble columns. A central fire burned, much like the campfire in the common area, though there wasn't a girl stroking the flames. Mr. D sat at the table, his table, with two boys whom Luke explained were his sons. Percy could see it, maybe not in the blonde hair and facial structure, but definitely in the lithe build and violet eyes. Grover sat with him, along with a few other strayers. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of serious-looking athletic kids, all with the same shade of gray eyes. Clarice sat at Aries' table with a group of strong, big children built like football players and bodybuilders. Her earlier ire was nowhere to be found. Percy squeezed together with the others at table 11, even though 4 of the tables were empty. Just another thing to add to the build list. Luke snorted at his face. Means he probably picked up on Percy's thoughts. Good, maybe he'll help. When everyone was seated, Chiron pounded his hoof against the marble floor, and everybody fell silent. He raised his glass to the gods. Everyone else raised their glasses to the gods. Food appeared, served by wood nymphs, and Luke explained the goblet. Cherry Coke, Percy told his glass, and it filled. Blue cherry Coke. It turned a violent shade of cobalt. He took a cautious sip, then grinned. Perfect. Soon, they gathered up food on a plate, and Percy followed them behind Luke to the center bazaar where other kids were throwing in food. Offerings for the gods, Luke murmured in his ear. They liked the smell. Percy's sure they actually didn't, as the food didn't seem to burn as much as disappear in the flames, but he wasn't going to argue against the one who had been here longer. Luke approached the fire, bowed his head, and tossed in a cluster of fat red grapes like he was feeding a dog. Hermes. Percy was next. He tossed in a few different pieces, focusing first on his mom, then Hades because if his mom was anywhere, it was with him, and finally on Hermes as thanks for letting him sleep in his cabin. The smell of fire should have been overwhelming, but it was washed with pomegranates and strawberries. He hesitated before moving back to the table, feeling a little guilty for leaving someone out, but it couldn't be helped. There were too many eyes, especially on him, especially now. He couldn't risk it, no matter how much he wanted to, maybe when the novelty of him had settled. When everyone finished, Chiron pounded his hoof again for everyone's attention. Dionysius, Mr. D, got up with a huge sigh. Yes, I suppose I should say hello to you all brats. Well, hello. Our activities director, Chiron, says the next capture the flag is Friday. Cabin 5 presently holds the laurels. A bunch of ugly cheering rose from the Ares cabin. Personally, Mr. D continued, I couldn't care less, but congratulations. Percy's lip twitched, though he was watching the god closely. That sour wine smell was back. It was like the god was sick, or waning. His form flickered between the trailer park turb and a young, effeminated man wearing nothing but the laurel wreaths and a long leopard pelt. No one else seemed to notice. Also, I should tell you that we have a new camper today. Peter Johnson. Chiron murmured something. Peter Jackson, Mr. D corrected. That's right. Hurrah, and all that. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on. Everybody cheered, and Percy followed the group towards the amphitheater. When Apollo's cabin led a sing-along, they sang camp songs about the gods and ate s'mores, and joked around like children. Percy relaxed in the chaos and the anonymity it gave him. Eventually the fire died down, and they all filed back to their cabins. Percy curled up on his sleeping bag, securing his backpack behind him, so someone would have to step over him for it. Sleep came easily. Memories of his mom came to the forefront. Their own s'mores and camp sing-alongs danced in his ears. He could almost convince himself that everything was okay. Over the next few days, he slotted into the routine of the cabin. He ended up getting out of ancient Greek with Annabeth, as he'd answered her in the language when she had come to get him for the lesson. He had a whole conversation with her before he noticed, much to the amusement of the others at the table. He'd also gotten out of the mythology history part of it when she quizzed him, so he had the mornings free. "You sure do know a lot about myths," another girl commented. She introduced herself as Holly, another child of Demeter with brown hair and warm brown eyes. She didn't have that edge Katie had, but she was nice all the same. "My mom learned Greek with me," he explained, "so I grew up with it. She taught me a lot about myths and stuff too." His voice died in his throat. "She was the best," he whispered. Holly looked at him sympathetically, patting his shoulders. He smiled thankfully before following Chiron's summons to check out the rest of the activities in camp. "Let's try to see where you fit in," Chiron said cheerfully when he approached the table. He nodded, locking in another staring contest with Dionysius. The sick smell was really starting to bother him. Was there any wine around? "Here is where you will practice wrestling. It appears the children of Apollo are here now, so please join their lessons and go to the archery range next." Percy nodded. He slipped into the crowd, easily falling back as he watched the demonstration. Clarice was the one leading the class, so he made the executive decision to sit out of participating. She had apparently caught sight of him despite his efforts, and hassled him for not engaging the whole time. He could feel the tension in the group building to a crescendo, the Apollo kids growing more and more tense every time Clarice threw an insult. It reached a peak when she swung a sword she shouldn't even have at him, almost taking out his nose. A snarl punctured the air, and then a tall, tan young man with brown curls, smelling like some flowery cologne and blood, was in front of Percy with glittering blue eyes. Much to Percy's surprise, Clarice visibly hesitated at the sight of him and the dagger he fingered. "At least give him a week," the young man sneered, a warning in his eyes. "I don't think a child of Ares would lower herself to hurting someone who can't fight back yet." She huffed, but backed off. The lesson was called to a close, and she didn't run out with a tail between her legs, but it was close. "Don't worry about Glenn," Kayla, another Apollo girl who had stuck close to him, whispered. "He's got our dad's protector of youth side, so he's always sticking up for the new campers." "That's cool," Percy said, then turned to Glenn. "You're cool." Glenn snorted and seemed to settle back to something less wild and more friendly. Percy liked him already. They went to archery next, in which Percy was relieved of any and all archery classes for the future within a few minutes of him getting his hands on a bow. Oops! The campers on the field hit the ground without question. Everyone watched as the arrow soared, missing the target by a mile, and somehow landing right in the water with a sharp thwack. As one, the group turned to Percy. "Should I try again?" he asked, looking at the bow in his hand warily. "No!" the whole of the Apollo cabin cried, and he nodded in agreement, dropping the bow where he stood. Horseback riding, or Pegasi riding really, was better. Percy chatted happily with the horses until it was time to move on, and promised to visit in his free time. Time in the forge was fun. Percy would want to spend time in there for the heat alone, and it turned out he wasn't half bad. "He's not one of ours," Charles Beckendorf, a Hephaestus kid, commented cheerfully. "But he's got a good base, so maybe a minor god, or at least one with an association with the forge." He ruffled Percy's hair, shaking some of the ash out of the wild strands. It didn't help much, but Percy was grinning regardless. Arts and crafts bore him a lot more luck as he zoned in on crafting a bracelet. "You definitely got some craft in you, Justin," a child of Aphrodite commented, examining the delicate pearl bracelet. "I think it would have looked better without knots between the pearls," another child of Aphrodite, Drew, said snottily from across the table. They both ignored her attitude. "Real pearls should have knots between them," Percy calmly explained to Justin, taking back the bracelet, "so they don't rub against each other and get damaged. And also, so if it breaks, you won't lose all the pearls." "Never thought of that," Justin said in thought, brushing blonde, brown-red hair out of his face. You're not a kid of Apollo or Aphrodite, but definitely someone with craft and charm in them. You think I'm charming? He laughed, looking up. They grinned back. If that look on your face isn't charm-inducing, he joked, I'm not sure what is. Percy just smiled and pocketed the bracelet to take. He began working on others, a plan forming in his head. Canoe racing was extremely fun, especially because Percy could manipulate the boats of the other campers. He quickly shot up the record board to first place, and by the time he left, bets were being made on who could beat him. The rock climbing was also fun, though Percy was definitely sure he wouldn't be beating the Destroyers anytime soon. He was too focused on how the ground seemed to be helping him up in small ways. A nudge there, a ledge jutting out where it hadn't before here. He had fun messing with it until it was time to move on. Definitely someone of the water, Luke grinned. Percy smiled, back up from where he'd plopped himself in the sea, unwittingly showing off sharp teeth. They had come down to the beach with the nymphs. You're like glowing or something. Luke turned to greet Kayla, who had come over out of curiosity, gesturing to him. Percy let them talk over him, turning to stare back out at the ocean, content in the gentle waves. If he focused, it almost felt like someone was cradling him. They would have sword fighting next, but Percy just relaxed and fought against the siren call of the open ocean. The next morning, the camp was awash with chatter for the upcoming game. Percy verged by the Hermes table, piling food up from breakfast. In the half-empty pavilion, he slipped a bracelet into the fire before any food. Hey, Dad, Percy whispered. Made you something. He didn't say name, instead drawing on the feeling inside of him, the depths of the sea that wrapped around his core of cresting waves. They hadn't been able to build an altar in their home, not wanting to draw unnecessary attention. Percy would make up for it now. He'd been getting presents all his life. It was time to return the favor. He went through his routine of the others afterwards, the smell of sea salt caramel overpowering pomegranate and strawberry almost jealously, and returned to his sea. Mr. D was staring at him like he was a particularly interesting puzzle. What looked like a cup of dark soda in his hand. The smell of wine reached him, and Percy smiled, glad that the god had found his gift. It wouldn't do to be caught, though. Percy mustered up his best seal impression and checked Dionysius' name off a list of gods he thought might or might not fall for it when the god promptly looked elsewhere. He soon left to find Grover, following the smell of goat, tin, and wild to the stables. How'd the conversation with Mr. D go? He asked. Your career still on track? Grover's face turned a sickly shade of yellow. Chiron told you I wanted a searcher's license? Is that what it's called? He just said you had big plans, and that you needed credit for completing a keeper assignment. Did you get it? His friend looked down. Mr. D suspended judgment. He said I hadn't failed or succeeded with you yet, so our fates were still tied together. If you got a quest and I went along to protect you, and we both came back alive, then maybe he'd consider the job complete. Ah, but Luke said there was no more quests, Percy pointed out, wincing at the thought. Setting you up to never succeed there. Even if you did, Grover said miserably, why would you want me along? Percy nudged their shoulders together. Of course I'd want you along. Who else would I bring? That didn't seem to knock Grover out of it, so Percy shifted topics to the cabins. I'm just curious why so many are empty. I mean, it makes sense with Hera and Artemis, the former being the goddess of marriage and the latter having a vow of maidenhood. But why are Zeus and Poseidon cabins empty? They had a lot of kids in the mythology. Grover shifted on his hooves uncomfortably. About 60 years ago, after World War II, the Big Three agreed that they wouldn't sire any more heroes. Their children were just too powerful. They were affecting the course of human events too much, causing too much carnage. World War II, was the basically fight between the sons of Zeus and Poseidon on one side, and the sons of Hades on the other. The winning side, Zeus and Poseidon, made Hades swear on an oath with them. No more affairs with mortals. They all swore on the river Styx. The air was thick with ozone, sea salt caramel, and pomegranates. Percy took a moment to wonder if the gods had nothing better to do than listen in on demigod conversations. 17 years ago, Grover continued, his face darkening, Zeus fell off the wagon. There was this TV starlet with a big, fluffy 80s hairdo. He just couldn't help himself. When their child was born, a little girl named Thalia, well, the river Styx was serious about promises. Zeus himself got off easy because he's immortal, but he brought a terrible fate on his daughter. Thalia, that name. But it wasn't the little girl's fault. Grover hesitated. Percy, children of the big three have powers greater than other half-bloods. They have a strong aura, a scent that attracts monsters. When Hades found out about the girl, he wasn't too happy about Zeus breaking his oath. Hades let out the worst monsters out of Tartarus to torment Thalia. Astraea was assigned to be her keeper when she was 12, but there was nothing he could do. He tried to escort her here with a couple of other half-bloods she befriended. They almost made it. They got all the way to the top of that hill. He pointed across the valley to the pine tree that whispered to Percy anytime he got close. All three kindly ones were after them, along with a horde of hellhounds. They were about to be overrun when Thalia told her strayer to take the other two half-bloods to safety while she held off the monsters. It was almost like he could see her, a girl with dark hair and electric eyes. She was wounded and tired, and she didn't want to live like a hunted animal. That strayer didn't want to leave her, but he couldn't change her mind. And he had to protect the others, so Thalia made her final stand alone on the top of that hill. As she died, Zeus took pity on her. He turned her into that pine tree. Her spirit still helps protect the border of the valley. That's why the hill is called Half-Blood Hill. She was looking at him, blood on her face and dripping down her nose. Despite this, she looked fierce and ready. She looked, he imagined, like he had when he faced the Minotaur. Except she had faced a lot worse. She shouldn't have been blamed for being born, he said quietly. The fault lies on Zeus's shoulders. Percy, Grover said worryingly, looking over at the sky nervously. If he considers himself a father, Percy answered sternly, then he knows it's his fault. If you consider yourself my father, Percy thought sternly, then you know it's your fault. He refused to be blamed for his father's mistakes. If he had to suffer for them, he was going to make sure his father knew why he was suffering. There was no thunder. The smell of ozone and pomegranates trickled away. Sea salt brushed his hair softly before following. Yeah, Percy thought. That's what I thought. Soon enough, it was dinner. Percy felt slightly petty as he approached the fire, gave Poseidon exactly one grape, a blueberry bagel to Hades, and dumped the rest of his plate to Hermes. He ignored the exasperation in the sea salt and relished in the amused pomegranate and strawberries as he gleefully rejoined the table. The game rules followed. He stuck to Luke as Annabeth and Clarice came with the flags. The teams were announced. Athena had made an alliance with Apollo and Hermes, the two biggest cabins. Ares had allied themselves with everyone else, Dionysius, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus. Chiron called for attention. Campers, he announced, you know the rules. The creek is the boundary line. The entire forest is fair game. All magic items are allowed. The banner must be prominently displayed and have no more than 2 guards. Prisoners may be disarmed, but may not be bound or gagged. No killing or maiming is allowed. I will serve as referee in battle. Medic, arm yourselves. Percy didn't bother with a shield, instead going for a sword and slipping back to Luke's side. You're on border patrol, the older boy told him, plopping a helmet with a blue horsehair plume on top of his head. Annabeth yelled them on, and they followed her down the path to the south woods. Soon enough, everyone spread out. He caught up to the leader for a better explanation of his role. It's easy. Stand by the creek, keep the reds away, leave the rest to me. Athena always has a plan. And watch out for Clarice's spear. You don't want that thing touching you. She pointed him in the right direction and disappeared. Percy huffed, tracking her scent on his 6 as he moved towards the water. Athena always has a plan, even if it means sacrificing a teammate apparently. Not very wise, in his opinion. Not unless you are willing to finish the job if the other side didn't. The conch shell was blown, the game had begun. Most of the game was spent waiting. He willingly sat in the water, listening to the sounds of rustling and sometimes fighting behind him. The smell of dog got closer. He pushed himself to his feet, staying in the water as he turned to face the woods. There he is! 5 Ares warriors came yelling and screaming out of the dark. Cream the punk, Clary screamed. Percy smiled. One of them hesitated, obviously the one with the most brain, and stared at him in near terror. The water behind him had risen in the dark, curling around his shoulders like an octopus. Clarice lunged regardless, and the dance began. He twisted out of range, catching the smell of electricity from her spear. He had to deal with that soon. He threw himself at another. Sword coming down hard. The water launched itself in the other direction. He wondered if they knew how much their blood sang to him. 2 down. He spun under one sword, kicking Clary's back, knocking his elbow upward to catch them on the nose. 3 down. The 4th ran. Coward. And it was just him and Clarice, circling each other. She growled at him like the dog she smelt like, and lunged with her spear. Percy caught it over the arm and forced it down. He brought up his sword and swiped. Crack! The spear snapped in half. He threw the sparking pieces in the water, fully destroying it as Clarice screamed in rage. You idiot! Your corpse breath warm! Then there was yelling, elated screams, and there was Luke, racing towards the boundary line with the red team's banner lifted high. He was flanked by a few Hermes kids, with another handful of Apollo kids covering the rear, fighting off the Hephaestus kids. The Ares members around him got up, and Clarice muttered in a daze, "A trick? It was a trick?" They staggered after Luke, but it was too late. He ran into friendly territory, and the blue team exploded in cheers. Percy watched as Luke was cheered for. Chiron cantered up from the woods and blew the conch horn, cementing their victory. "Are you going to come out now?" he asked almost lazily. "Join the celebration, maybe?" "How?" Annabeth shimmered into existence, holding a blue Yankees baseball cap as if she'd just taken it off her head. "How did you know I was there?" He smiled, secretly shrugging. "You set me up," he felt the need to point out. "I told you, Athena always has a plan. Plan's dangerous if you're willing to betray the people on your team." She looked a bit startled. "Betray?" she asked. He gestured to the broken spear. "Being used as bait? Unless someone offers or you're ready to deal with the fallout, I'd be careful. I knew what you were planning. The next person might not. You could be making a very dangerous enemy." "I guess," she said, squinting at him. "You're—" Growling interrupted her, but not the growling from before. This was colder, more canine. The smell of dog. They drew their swords. The other campers grew silent, a tense hush settling over everyone. There, on the rocks just above them, was a black hound the size of a rhino, with lava-red eyes and things like daggers. It was looking straight at Percy. "Percy, run!" Annabeth yelled. She tried to step in front of him, but the hound was too close. It leapt over her, an enormous shadow with teeth, and Percy lunged backwards, an arm coming up just as several thwacks echoed through the air. Water in the shape of a spear had gotten the dog in the side, and several arrows stuck on its flank. Percy had only just barely managed to stay out of reach. The monster was dead at his feet. Chiron trotted up next to them, a bow in his hand, his face grim. "By the gods," Annabeth exclaimed. "That's a hellhound from the Fields of Punishment. They're not supposed to—" "Someone summoned it," Chiron said grimly. "Someone inside this camp." Luke came over, the banner in his hand forgotten, his moment of glory gone. "It's all Percy's fault. Percy summoned it," Clarice yelled. "Oh yeah," Glenn piped up, the sarcasm in his voice palpable. "The kid just attacked. Summoned it. Great thinking there." A few people snickered at Clarice's red face. Percy grimaced, a hand pressed to his side as it throbbed. Damn. He stepped back into the water, and Annabeth gasped. The gathered campers were looking at him, or more accurately, what was above his head. He looked up, blinking. There was a large hologram of green light, demanding to be looked at, daring anyone to ignore it. A 3-tipped spear, a trident. Your father, Annabeth murmured. This is really not good. It is determined, Chiron announced. All around, the campers started kneeling, even Clarice, looking none too happy about it, got down. Poseidon, said Chiron, looking like he aged more in that single moment than he had in 1,000 years. Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses. Hail, Percy Jackson, son of the sea god.